Yeah, of course. And anybody else coming in, they can just jump in where we are. But hello, everyone. My name is Erin Jordan. I'm joined by Spencer today. We're from Keystone Click. And if you weren't aware, Keystone Click is a digital marketing agency based out of Milwaukee. We help create custom tailored strategies to fit the unique needs of our clients, really focusing on the B2B marketing space, but we do a whole lot more than that. Spencer, I don't know if you want to jump in here and share a little something about yourself.
Yeah, my name is Spencer Bard. I'm the sales and marketing coordinator at Keystone Click, and I know both Aaron and I have been very involved with our social media and our content. So we've done a lot of recycling when it comes to our content. So we know a lot about the subject, and we're ready to let you guys know a few things.
Yeah. Alrighty.
Yeah, so repurposing content. What is it and what are the benefits? We're going to cover how to slice and dice your content to create even more content for your audience. Then we're going to go over some best practices for posting generally and for best practices for posting recycled content, repurposed content. And then we're going to go over quickly how to create a content calendar with your recycled content implemented into it.
Yep. And at the end, we've got a Q&A session, but definitely at any point, if you have questions, feel free to chat them to us or in the group. We'll either answer them in real time or at that end session. We also have a couple of just beginner quiz questions. We'll cover these as we go through our presentation, but the first question we're going to ask you is, why is it called evergreen content? If you're not familiar with the term, don't worry. But if you are familiar, you've got a couple options here. We're going to let you think on that. And then I think we have another question.
Yep, I know. 2 questions when we're supposed to be teaching. It's not fair, but how much of your content should be recycled versus new? A, you got 60% versus 40%. B, 20% new versus 80% recycled. 70% new, 30% recycled, and 50-50. So think of your answers, and we'll get to them later in the presentation. You can use the honor system to tell us if you're right or wrong.
Absolutely. So what we're talking about today is reusing and recycling content. And the core kind of concept here for you is you're taking one piece of content that you have that's really strong or gives you a lot of options to split it up into multiple pieces of content that you can share across multiple channels. So the example here with our graphic, you have a podcast or an interview that you do. You can not only create, a blog kind of transcript you can put on your website of that interview, as well as like a LinkedIn article. And then you can break up that into a bunch of individual quotes or takeouts that you post on your social media. You could do short video clips if you recorded that interview. That's one example. We'll go through a couple of more actually of what we've done here at Keystone Click. But this concept essentially is you're taking one piece of content and you're using it in a variety of ways over the course of time and really, maximizing it for your business. So the benefits of recycled content, we've got a joke, recycling is good for the environment, but that's not what we're talking about today. Really, there's a couple of things that recycling content allows you to do. We always say that content that you're sharing for your brand needs to be consistent, valuable, and relevant. And really having a content library that you pull from again and again allows you to meet that criteria of posting content consistently, having content that's valuable, whether it be something quite large or little nuggets spaced out, and then content that remains relevant to your audience, which is really important. Having content that you recycle, or building up your content library over time. Pulling from that, you can establish a new channel. Say you have a Facebook page, but now you want to have a LinkedIn company page. You can pull some of that content that you already have into, when you first start out your LinkedIn page to build up your content and grow your audience. So it's definitely a path to establishing a new channel with ease. Recycling content also, in the way that we're presenting it, allows you to have multiple touch points within your sales funnel. So, not only are you providing a white paper through, an email campaign that really hits at like the middle of your sales funnel, if you're familiar with that, but you're also giving, little sections of that white paper on your social media, which hits more at the top of your funnel, really just raising your brand's awareness. And that's the last point here, is that recycling your content allows you to increase your brand's awareness and your content's reach. Whether that content is something you put together 6 months to a year ago, refreshing it, slicing and dicing it allows you to share it again across the channels that you want to be found on. So we can't not talk about automation when it comes to recycling content. Really, marketing automation tools allow you to publish content consistently, and especially when it comes to your recycled content. So we use Sendable at Keystone Click. It's something we frequently mention as like a good platform for posting on social media. But one of the main benefits of Sendable is it provides a queue that you can set to be automatic. So say you want to post 3 times a week, you can set that up and you can recycle your messages. So something that you posted 6 months ago will be at the bottom of your queue, and eventually you can move it up to the top if you're looking for something to post, and it ensures that you're consistently posting on those days, whether or not you have something more time sensitive or relevant, or just something that is evergreen, which we'll get into in a little bit. So here's a couple of examples here. We're going to go through. The first one we have is our Keystone Click Guide to Profits. This is a white paper we put together not too long ago. And as we go through these examples, we're showing different types of larger pieces of content, or content that we've taken and split it in a number of ways and found some value within that. So with Guide to Profits, we've got Guide to Profits has like 42 tips, action items for you to grow your business. And so each of those tips, we actually made a video on, and each of our staff members could elaborate a little bit on that tip, but it was a great content piece that then we could share on our social media channels, and have like a YouTube playlist as well. And we also did an email campaign, so sharing different parts or highlights of that Guide to Profits, eventually encouraging our audience to download the full white paper.
Yep, and the next white book that we have to talk about is our manufacturing white book. So what this is, it's a white book that's there for manufacturing, offering branding tips, lead generation tips for pretty much exclusively manufacturing companies. And what we did is, because we really weren't connected with many manufacturing companies, we knew we had to advertise on social media. So we've got multiple tips that we would put out on social media once a month type of deal. And even though it's not like Guide to Profits where there are 42 set tips, the white paper has sections that we were able to take a tip off and throw it into an image for social media. And even on National Manufacturing Day, that's another way that we were able to utilize it. We were able to do a post on manufacturing, thanking manufacturers and asking them to download the free guide. And then we also had an email campaign as well, which did more of the same things that we did on social media, but instead reached out to specific manufacturers, businesses that we had been connected with, and really just encouraged them to download it, show the value, show the tips, show how this could help them, and really just taking the small bits of content to really promote our bigger piece of content for them.
And so the next example we have is actually our current content marketing webinar series.
Webinars.
This is a little bit of a behind the scenes look at what we're doing, but I've got two more paths for this one here. The first one being what we do ahead of the webinar. So before each webinar that we do, we record a couple of promotional videos and do a couple of additional social media posts advertising our webinar. Maybe that's how you found out about this one. We hope. We've got a great fun DJ one that we did for this webinar, but we also do emails ahead of time, just sharing when the webinar is and kind of the main highlights that we'll be covering. Post-webinar, we're writing a blog or two about the actual content that we covered in each, as well as putting together a couple of social media posts about, each little section that we shared within the webinar. So that's kind of what we're doing right now. And webinars are kind of a unique form of content that really you can use in a number of ways.
Yeah, and then blogs. So every business should be blogging, and what blogs are, they're bigger piece of content that you can pull smaller piece of content from. So with our blogs, we will write the blog and then typically we'll have a social media post for it. So sometimes we'll make a little infographic with tips that are big points from the blog, like in the bottom right. And then sometimes we'll make a little Canva video or with the tips as well, as you can see at the top. So, I mean, what this would mean for any business is a blog is big. You can do a blog on 5 tips, and each of those tips could be its own social media post. So pretty much every blog, you can pull out small tidbits and you can repurpose the blog and have an advertised people to go see your blog. So pull out the small tidbits of information, advertise people to go to the big piece of information from there.
Yeah. And it doesn't always have to be a very large piece. We've showed you a couple of different sizes of information, whether that be a blog like Spencer mentioned, or the white papers are a little bit longer than a blog. A webinar or an interview is somewhere in between, but really the idea is you have a solid piece of content and you're breaking it out in a way that's going to make sense and just shares a little bit of that value tailored to that channel. So next, we're going to cover evergreen content. Evergreen content is super important when it comes to recycling content. We'll get into that in a moment. You'll remember that I asked a question at the beginning of why is it called evergreen content? Is it because it's fresh? Because evergreen tree never loses its green leaves? Because green means go? Or because the content supposedly drives organic traffic? I don't know if you guys want to share your answers at all in the chat. Looks like a couple of people are answering and getting it right. It is B. So
My answer was C.
Your answer was C. Yeah. So it's called evergreen content actually because the evergreen tree never loses its green leaves. It never participates in the normal fall of changing colors and losing leaves and growing. It just always stays green. And that's kind of what evergreen content's about. It's content that has relevancy year round. So rather than something being time sensitive or seasonal, covering best tips for the new year, that's something that's relevant at one point versus here are 5 tips on how to best blog for your business. That's something that's a little bit more timeless and is consistently relevant perhaps for your audience. So there's definitely a balance between sharing evergreen content versus something that's time sensitive, or even participating in certain trends, which are short-lived depending. Um, the other point here, as far as evergreen content's concerned, is you're able to maintain more consistently organic traffic. So the example I have at the bottom, I thought it was really funny, is for I think an article about the 2020 election. Somebody put an article out and they had that spike of hope and then a flat line of nope. And really that's because it was, oh, maybe this graph isn't quite for the election, not sure. But they shared something that was really trendy in January 2017, but beyond that, it didn't have or maintain its relevance for the audience. Whereas evergreen content is something that hopefully people are always coming back to your site and finding value in. So it's really best to reuse and recycle evergreen content because it has that continued relevancy and something that you can continue to share over time. But it is important to note that evergreen content is not always a one and done. It's always good to go back and update content as needed, especially if it's, for us, we talk a lot about different tools and analytics and Google, and that stuff constantly changes, right? The media landscape constantly changes. So there's times where we'll look at content and the bones are good, but it's time to update, how we describe a certain process because it looks different. But that's an easy way for us to quickly go in, share a little bit more, and then give that new value to the audience. And then I've got a couple of pointers here about actually how to build evergreen content. Really, like all forms of content, you want to align it with your content strategy. Really think about, what your audience, your core audience is looking for, has questions about, and also generally, thinking about what your brand specializes in and what content relates to that the most. We definitely recommend building evergreen content around keywords. Evergreen content can easily boost your site's SEO because it is something that will live on your site probably for a longer amount of time and gain traffic consistently over time. That's the goal. I did want to highlight Google Trends allows you to, when you're doing keyword research, generally that's within the time frame that you're doing that research, but Google Trends actually lets you look at keywords and how they've been relevant over time. So definitely recommend checking that out when building evergreen content in particular. I have target more words with an asterisk here. I think that evergreen content doesn't have to be extremely lengthy, but definitely for sharing it or splitting it up, like we were talking about earlier, into a couple of different sections, you want a little bit more room to play when you actually go through that slice and dice process. And the last point I have here is review and update before reusing that content. Again, going back to as you reshare over time, definitely you want to look through, make sure your links still work, and maybe there's a new article that you could link to or a statistic you could update here and there. But overall, it's content that is living on your platform, and it's not something that is short-lived or time sensitive.
All right, best practices for posting. And I'm going to preface this with a quote from Neil Patel. It is, if you post infrequently, your audience will forget that you exist and you will quickly fade into the deep, dark recesses of their mind. However, if you are posting too often, you'll become a complete nuisance and they will dread seeing your posts in their overcrowded feed. So it's pretty extreme, but I thought that was a pretty fun, interesting quote from a well-recognized marketer. So we can move on. So let's see the answer to the quiz. If anyone wants to throw it in quick, what they think. C, D. All right, let's see. It's actually B, and the pie graph isn't precise, but you want more recycled content than new content. Why is that? It's because one, less work, two, recycled evergreen content is always good to go and it will always be relevant for your viewers regardless of the time. And most of your new content, you're going to want just to be events, time sensitive stuff. Like from the blogs I'd shown earlier, one of the blogs was what we expect to see in marketing in 2021. That's an example of a time sensitive content. And that's something we usually don't do. And the other one was best blogging practices or something along those lines. And that's something we'd like to do more, is find topics of information that are going to be useful to our audience and show our expertise throughout years.
Yeah. I will add here, this is a rule that we typically recommend, but you may evaluate your business and maybe you have a lot of time sensitive events that you want to promote, and you can kind of fudge this percentage, but generally you are working with content that is more evergreen and you're recycling because it maintains that value for your audience.
Yeah, so as you mentioned in the quiz, most of your content can be recycled content versus new content. And your content can include repurposed content, especially if you're just slicing and dicing from, say, a blog or a webinar or a news release. That information also comes out as recycled, repurposed content when you are sharing smaller from a larger piece. And that brings us to our 70-20-10 rule, which is kind of our rule of thumb that we use here at Keystone Click. So what the 70% means is that 70% of your content should be providing industry related news and value to your audience. So that could be industry news, thought leadership, etc. And it's really about showcasing your level of expertise to your audience. So that's the most important, the bulk of what you should be posting about. And then the 20% of your content should be shared from other accounts or engaging with people. If they comment on your post, respond to them. If you see a tweet you like, respond to it, so on and so forth. And then 10% of your content that you share should be directly related to sales, such as talking about your services, inviting people to an event, advertising your newsletter, so on and so forth. So doing this will ensure that you're providing value to your audience and showing your expertise. So when it comes time to promote your sales content, you will have that established trust and authority with your audience. So other best practices. So all of your content you want to be driving back to your site. So especially on social media, you want to have a strong call to action that leads them back to your site, whether it be a blog or a service or whatnot and so forth. You're driving customers back to your site with your valuable content that you prove to them that you are an expert in the industry with. And then in terms of consistency, so in order to raise your brand awareness, you need to be consistent and be consistent with what you're publishing. So frequency in our minds is a little less important than consistency when you're publishing content across all your channels. And the consistency ensures that your brand stays strong and your audience stays engaged. And on social media, it's important to be consistent with your voice, messaging, and imagery across all channels as well. This will increase your brand's image and make it more recognizable. And when you have a consistent voice and schedule across all your social media channels, your brand will have more visibility. That means more people seeing and engaging your content. And by that, more people will know about your brand. And then in terms of blogs, it's important to stay consistent to your publishing schedule, which this will help you rank higher in search queries, as well as for your audience to see that you're consistently posting a blog, and they'll see it as an indicator of trust and authority. And then quality content. So for social media, this goes back to what we talked about a couple episodes ago. It's crucial to use visual aids like infographics, images, and videos, because those all lead to far higher engagement rates regardless of channel. And it's also important to tailor your content to each specific channel. So Twitter, you're going to want to be more conversational, short, actionable, and using relevant hashtags, versus LinkedIn, where you want to share your knowledge and really be more formal and show your expertise. But also making sure that you're keeping your company's voice consistent throughout both channels, or all channels. And then in terms of blogging, quality doesn't necessarily mean writing a massive blog. It's whether you have sufficiently addressed the search intent of the specific keyword that you're talking about in the problem. So if you can answer the question that you're trying to solve in your title and your blog, you'll rank higher on search queries. So that's why we suggest, when you're thinking about what to write for a blog, really think about the questions your customers ask you. And when you can solve a pain point that people are facing in the form of a blog, it will establish trust and drive more traffic to your website. And a simple template making sure that you achieve those practices is to post on social media once a day, publish blogs once or twice a month on a consistent day. So if you're posting one blog a month, make sure it's on the same day every month. And then typically one email newsletter a month that informs your audience about everything that's going on with you and shares valuable information. Then the rest of your marketing activities can kind of fall in place after that. So now we have the simple template when it comes to best practice when posting. It comes down to keeping track of your publishing schedule and making sure all of your marketing contact activities are there for you.
Yes, definitely. We recommend mapping out kind of when you're doing each of those activities. Like Spencer said, you want to be consistent with when you post. I also want to say, when you're sharing on social media, going back to those like visual images and aids, you can use different visuals on each platform if you want to kind of upcycle that content. So you're sharing the same content that's valuable, relevant across multiple channels, but it has a slightly different look or feel that fits within what works best on that platform, if that makes sense. So a couple benefits of keeping a content calendar: definitely it keeps you organized, like any planner or calendar does. It helps you keep track essentially of all your content that's being published, and essentially, where your effort is as far as your marketing activities and your promotions. So it helps you stay on schedule as well. You have that structure for the content that you're publishing, and you're making sure that you're consistently posting when your audience expects it. Humans are a creature of habit, and if you send a newsletter out for 3 months and each month it's on the first of the month, that fourth month your audience is expecting that newsletter in their email. So definitely making sure to hit on when you establish that expectation. And really having a content calendar allows you to deepen your brand's voice. You can keep a consistent tone and message across all channels because you're keeping track of which channels and what content you're putting out, and making sure that you are staying consistent as far as your messaging is concerned.
Yeah, so this looks very all over the place, but it's very organized. So when you're doing your content calendar, when you're starting it, the first step is to plan ahead. So generally we recommend filling out your content calendar a month before, or at least a couple weeks. So that ensures that you have enough time to make updates or changes without having to improvise too much. And we use Google Sheets, but also Microsoft Excel, and there are other tools that will also work as well. So the first step of planning ahead includes creating a general calendar that includes all your marketing activities from social media posts to blogs. So as you can see, we have the general outline for us too. We have the dates on the left going across the rows. And then we have all of our activities from things that we're posting on the website, which are blogs, when we're hosting a webinar, when our newsletter sends, when our webinars are, when our webinar emails go out. So that's what we usually do before we start thinking about social media topics. So before we even start adding the topics to the calendar, we add all our activities that are already structured. So blogs, webinars, webinar emails, and newsletter. And those kind of help us lay out the rest of our topics and social media posts. And then another fun thing to do is including a theme / national holiday. So that can give you some fun ideas for posts that we have been using. And then you can start organizing your ideas for social media posts, which can seem daunting, but since this webinar is all about slicing and dicing your existing content, let's go over how we can do that with what we do. So here's step one. This is going to kind of go back over our webinar example, but it's really just ingraining this into your head about how one piece of large content can bring about so many other pieces. So first, we host our webinar every other Thursday. And then from that, step two, the second piece of content is we'll post the webinar on YouTube, and that'll usually happen the same day or the day after. And what that's for is that we can send the link to anyone who registered. So if they want to go back and watch parts to take a note of something, or if they miss it entirely, they can rewatch it.
Yeah, it's also for our subscribers too, if you subscribe to our whole series.
Can't forget about that. Then third, so after every webinar, it's got so much content that there's so much information that we might as well write a blog out of it, right? So that's what we do after the blog. It's the responsibility of the two people who hosted the webinar to do the blog. So that's the third piece of content that goes out there. And then fourth, we have a post from the blog. So as you mentioned before, this will be in promotion of the blog. It'll be an infographic, or it could be a small video. Really just so much content is coming from just this one piece. And then last but not least, we'll find a clip that we really like from the webinar, and we'll create it and we'll put it into a small little video just for our social media to be like, learn from our last webinar. And that helps not only promote our past webinar, our thought leadership, but also helps promote our future webinars. So as you can see, visual, there's the YouTube video from our last webinar. There's the blog that was written from it. There's the social media post for the blog, and there's the learn from our last webinar video. And so obviously not every business does webinars, but there's so many ways to slice and dice content that there's always ways to produce more. And if you write a blog, create social media posts with images from the main points of the blog, they don't even have to be all promoting the blog. They can just be there to promote your expertise and industry knowledge. So post ideas. So another added benefit of a spreadsheet for your content calendar is that it allows you to add multiple tabs, which you can see on the bottom, which open up other spreadsheets. So why is that useful? So on your main tab, you can just have your main post ideas and keep the general structure of all of your marketing activities. And then on the other tabs, we can have individual posts for each social media channel. So this is what kind of a general structure will look like for us. So you'll have the social media channel, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter are our main three. Then you'll have the post subject, and then underneath copy, you'll have what the post is going to be. And then you can add any links, images, and notes. So, so it's important that each platform has its individual feel. So that's why we have 3 different spots for each platform, just so we're not using the same verbiage over and over. And then another aspect of the content calendars, at least with ours, is that you might not have enough information to write the post right when you create the calendar each month. So for each webinar, we create 2 posts from it and a blog. So until after the webinar, we won't know exactly what that post was, but that's where the main calendar comes in handy, because you'll at least know that the social media post or the blog or the webinar is coming up, and you'll be able to prepare that post in advance, and you'll know it's there. So when you are able to create it, you'll be able to write it down.
Yeah. And it's an expectation that that content is more evergreen in nature. So it's something that like we could continue to share down the line, and it would still be important and valuable to our audience.
Yeah, some other best practices. Run your post through Grammarly. Excel or Sheets do not have grammar checks. So if you post something with a error on social media, it will be noticed and it's not a great look. So it's best practice to run everything through Grammarly before, just to make sure it's fine tuned. Then always have, oh, yep, like that one. May not notice. I put in a funny there. So then always have a team member review. So that's something we always do at Keystone Click. Before anything gets put out to the public, blog, social media post, content calendar, it's always going to get one, usually two sets of eyes on it. And what that does is not only it'll catch some grammatical errors, but it'll also help you fine tune the message, give you any suggestions, and really just helping you knock it out of the park and making sure that the posts are going to be perfect. And then last but not least is creating a library for all your assets. Aaron had touched on this earlier in the presentation, but keeping all of your images that you have used, especially the evergreen images, is going to be crucial. And as she mentioned, you can kind of do that in Sendable, where you can add all of your evergreen posts to the queue. And it's really just helpful making sure you don't lose any of the content that could be posted in the future.
Yeah, it's important you keep that content library somewhere so you can pull on it again. What's great about Sendable or another automation tool as far as posting is all of that already lives there, and it's just one click away from going back out to your social channels. I'm not sure which one of us was going to go over just quickly kind of what we talked about today, but in summary, really our point, if you take anything away, you know, recycled content helps you increase your brand awareness because you're able to consistently post and share content that's relevant and engaging to your audience. All those quote unquote larger pieces of content can be sliced and diced to create new pieces of repurposed content or share little bits at a time. It's really just a way to help you boost and kind of beef up your content calendar and what you're sharing. Evergreen content is useful, extremely so, and the 80-20 rule is a good thumb, although depending on what your goals are and the kinds of activities you're looking to promote, you may decide on a slightly different ratio that's best for your business. And lastly, we really think that a content calendar is important for you to keep track of all your marketing activities. So again, you can consistently publish your quality and engaging content. That about wraps up our webinar for today. I know we blew through that. We're going to have questions in a moment if you want to go ahead and throw in some questions in the chat. But we do want to plug the last two webinars in our content marketing webinar series. The next one is a really fun and new one that we're doing, which is cocktails and case studies. We're actually bringing on one of our current clients, and we'll be sharing a cocktail recipe for you to mix up and enjoy while we talk through kind of the case study and what they learned as far as content marketing and how it helped their business. And then a huge favorite when we do our webinars is the concluding expert panel discussion, where we get marketing experts to come in and talk about, in this case, all things content marketing. So both of those are March 11th and March 25th. So be on the lookout and sign up for those. You can go to keystoneclick.com/webinars to find out information and how to register.
Yeah, and then that brings us to our content strategy offering. So you know how to create a content calendar. Now it's time to fill up that calendar with some blog posts and some social media posts that are going to engage your audience. And there's no better way to do that than to sign up for a content strategy session with Lori, where you'll walk away with 20 post ideas and 6 blog post ideas where you can use to populate your calendar. Not to mention that you'll be able to slice and dice your blog post for even more content. But seriously, if you're looking to jumpstart your efforts, you won't find a better offer than this. The whole session is only $99, and every single person who's signed up so far has walked away with just a new arsenal of ideas for their content marketing efforts. If anyone's interested in signing up, I'll send the link to the chat. And after, if you sign up, be on the lookout for an email from Lori containing a calendar link for you to sign up, as well as a questionnaire that helps us get to know your business a bit better.
Yeah, guys, this is extremely valuable. It's heavily discounted just because you've stuck it out with us, and we hope you enjoyed this webinar. But really, Lori Hybe, our Keystone Click CEO and founder, definitely knows her stuff. And like Spencer said, has just everyone that's gone through it has seen so much success and found it so valuable. So we definitely recommend looking into it if you're interested. And lastly, it comes time for our questions. So I think we've got one question. Where do you start if you don't think you have anything, or at least anything new to share with your audience? Yeah, definitely that content session that we're recommending would help. But I think, you know, it's really about starting with that maybe one piece of larger evergreen content, whether that's a blog or even a white paper, something that really hits on maybe the core of what you do, breaks it down into a structure that then you can share each little piece of section across other channels. So I think it's really about, going back to the basics of a content strategy. You're looking at your audience, what questions are they asking you, and how do you answer that both in a long form written piece of content, but also in short little snippets, and just really, what are they asking? What are they looking for? How do you show your expertise?
Yeah, and I would piggybacking off that, share industry related news, share something new with happening in the industry, or back to what my suggestion was for blogs earlier, you can use for social media as well. Think about the big questions when you're on a phone call with a customer or you're talking to a customer. Write down or think about the questions that they ask you during that conversation. And all of those can be good ideas for social media posts, because people love when you answer their questions or solve their pain points before they even knew they had them. And that'll really just show your expertise and motivate people to engage with you and establish that trust, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, that's a great point too. Just sharing things that you find relevant based on the industry that you're in can really help you get started. And then from there, if you see one or two that you think, oh, you know what, I could write something similar and provide my own expertise and input, and then go from there. It really is just starting out, building up your platform and what you're sharing, and from there you're able to build out bigger pieces of content that will then start working for you.
Yeah, and I've got one question from the chat. Says, could you elaborate how you could update blogs or how that works?
Yeah, definitely. So I was talking about it a little bit earlier, but I think one of the things to always look for in a blog, is there a section or something that you talk about that's outdated? Definitely, refreshing that to current times, updating your links. I would also say, as far as a blog's concerned, maybe you've changed your messaging a little bit, or you want to target a new audience too. I think there's real value in looking at your messaging and tailoring it for a new audience or a new perspective that you'd like to resonate with. So I think there's some ideas there, but definitely if your blogs don't already have kind of a clear structure, as far as, do you use subheadings and break out into short little sections? Not only is that easier for your reader to understand, but it's also easier on you when it comes time to slice and dice your content. Oh yeah. So Spencer, I've got another question from the queue. When is it a good time to look at your overall kind of content library, as far as like, I think what they mean here is like refreshing their content, or um, looking through and kind of cleaning it out?
Yeah, for sure. I'd say, well, if you've never created a content calendar before and this is going to be your first one, I'd say do it before you do that, because that might give you some post ideas and it'll allow you to refresh anything that's not. And other than that, usually on a quarterly, maybe bi-quarterly basis would be a good way to do it, because you'll be able to see which content isn't relevant anymore. And maybe you'll notice content that has been posted in a while that's still relevant that can be upcycled, as we covered in this presentation. So I'd say quarterly is good for a good time to do that.
Yeah. And we've talked a little bit too about like, um, going back through blogs, but even, your content library, as far as your social media posts, there's some that maybe could use some tweaks in messaging to still be relevant, or you could add a new and improved infographic or regular graphic that goes along with it, or it's a great short video idea. I think there's a lot to say for going back and seeing what you've done, and is there a way to improve it slightly and still have it be relevant and work for you and your audience?
Any more questions? Not seeing any. Well, if there are no more questions, thank you guys so much for joining us today. If there is anything that comes up, you can always reach out to us after the webinar, aaron.jordan@KeystoneClick, or reach out to me at spencer.bard@KeystoneClick. And be on the lookout for your email tomorrow morning, and we will send you a link to the webinar. So if you want to go back, watch a certain part, copy the content calendar structure we had, that's always there for you.
Yeah. Thanks so much for joining us, y'all. We really hope you took something away. So keep in touch, sign up for our future webinars, and we'll see you around.
Thank you guys. Bye.